Hello, I'm Aleksi Aksan. In Tranquility, I'm an FC and director with nothing on DScan. But here, I'm one of the freshest members of our commentators crew, and I believe I was dragged here under somewhat false pretenses.
Lies.
Hi, I'm Anum. I'm from Laserhawks on TQ, and I captain the Power Ducks team in the minor league.
Hello, my name is Brett Thomas. I'm on Tranquility. I'm an FC for Pandemic Horde. I'm also the former AT captain for last year that we didn't get in. And at the moment here, I am the main Logi pilot for the major team Clever Girls, and I'm also a minor league commentator when the system doesn't get fucked up.
Yeah, I'm Ithica Hawk. On TQ, I fly with Load This, a wormhole group. In this tournament, I fly with Team Johnny in the major leagues, and I also commentate on the minor leagues, just like Brett.
And hello, I'm Loca. I'm the marketing manager for EVNT. In-game, I am a Laserhawk, and I'm also a member of Anum's Power Ducks team that plays in the minor leagues for the championships.
Alright,
And sorry, I just cut in there. Bad habit doing that. I'm Bei, and I am one of the event staff that help run the tournaments.
who do you fly with on Tranquility?
Oh, on Tranquility, I'm the CEO of a corp called The Culture. Sidekicks, that are made up of guys who used to be in Ministry of Inappropriate Footwork, and we fly for The Culture.
Okay, so I was somewhat close. I introduced you for you, and I just kind of made up
Oh,
alliance names. Alright, so we'll kick this off, and we can talk about the minor leagues, which happened last weekend, and I think the majority of us were at least watching or aware of what was going on. So, what'd you guys think of last weekend?
It was
I
a
thought
really
good
fun time.
start.
Yeah. The excitement was crazy. There's going to be 7 matches for each team inside this competition, and every single one feels like it's a final almost. It's crazy. You just want to get in there and you want to start playing, and the teams are immense as well. I remember being extremely nervous going into it, but it was so much fun as well. Even if we didn't have the best of weekends, it was still a really good time, and I'm really hyped to get playing here.
Yeah, I quite enjoy watching the minor leagues because you tend to get people throwing out a bit more off the wall setups. Like the major league people tend to take it a little bit more serious, and then they come in with their setups. But I think we saw the first ever use of a Logifrig by, I want to say Sudnotters.
Indeed.
Yeah.
In the tournament the other day, which was pretty cool. No one expected that, and you also saw a couple of people using the AB frigs like the slasher. So they tend to do a little bit more wild things. They also, I've seen one team have this very bizarre tactic where they actually micro jump drive out of the arena, which is a bold strategy to be honest. I haven't seen that
Tactical
work just
feed.
yet.
Can we have a clock on how long we made it without
We just talk
mentioning
about
that micro
now,
jump?
So I was on the receiving end of the Hyperion thing, and I have to say that was pretty awesome.
You were the team captain, is that right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Could you
What
explain
was
what
it?
happened? Because we all
Yeah,
still
what was the
want to
story?
know.
So which
Well,
was this,
there was that like an oracle like burning off itself. I'm just like, yeah, MJD onto it, yeah. And then he MJD before he was properly aligned, and yeah, that was about it.
Doesn't
I think he was like turning right when he was meant to be turning left.
doesn't an MJD take like 5 seconds to spool up? Like, I don't know. I find
Yeah.
it difficult. Like, how did he double click away from like everything going on? Like, I don't know.
Well, as soon as you
Oh,
click
when
the
you-
button, you're committed. Like it doesn't matter if you're still turning. So wherever you click the button, wherever you're
Oh.
facing at that particular point in time, if your ship keeps continuing around, you'll just sort of jump sideways. Doesn't make a difference. It's wherever you're pointing at the moment you click the button.
So it's kind of different than command destroyers, where when you click the button and then somebody bumps you, you can turn completely the opposite direction and get like jump everyone like the wrong direction. It's only when you
can still
initially...
You can still get bumped, but you can't yourself change direction.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not realize that. Okay, this is why I don't fly battleships.
In yeah, little fun story in Syndicate competitive League 5, which was which is a tournament run by a couple of guys. I can't remember. I think there was some Rote Capel involvement there, and a guy from Goons. And they ran a tournament that finished, blimey, it must be 2-3 years ago now. Anyway, they did 5 of these tournaments. They were really fun, and I took part in 3 of them, I think. But in the 5th one, it was when Micro Jump Drives had just been introduced to the game, and also Bastion. And one of my, I was team captaining Team Footwork, and one of my my team members, he kind of had this theory that if you bumped a ship, like he figured out like this, they'd just come out and he'd been playing with the mechanics, and he'd figured out that once you activate the MJD, you can't control the ship yourself. And so a lot of people in training were bringing in a battleship at 50 kilometers and then instantly jumping on top of the enemy team because the standard kind of range to warp in out is 50 kilometers. So he spent about a week developing an interceptor fit where it started at 0, and he timed it to be able to warp from 0 immediately at a micro jump drive battleship and hit it so that it bounced out of the arena. And I was like, there's no way you could pull this off like reliably enough for it to be a tactic in the tournament. Like it's such a long shot. So I made him practice it. And I said, I'm only going to let you do that in an actual match if you do it 9 times out of 10 on CC for me. So he actually pulled me. He's like practiced for like 3 or 4 days straight, and then he pulled me aside, looked on the CC, and did it 10 out of 10 times. So we actually used this fit. Like I can't remember. I think it was Try the Verge, who were basically Try, and they brought a Paladin in at 50 kilometers. He had the Scepter at 0. We kind of gambled that they were going to bring a Paladin. We brought the Scepter. And yeah, he just hit the Paladin square on the nose, and it MJD'd directly out of the arena. We won the match in like under 60 seconds. It was great.
Oh my god.
No, everyone's like, "Oh my god, that was so lucky that intercepted the pilot." No, he practiced and just hit the Paladin just on the nose of the thing. Like it was total skill. It was brilliant. It was such a good play.
But that's not what happened here. This was an accident. Sadly.
Yeah, I made the story up. Yeah.
So, out of all the teams that played last weekend, who surprised you guys the most? Like, who made the biggest sort of shocker, would you say?
I really liked the Logi frigate because that was the first time I think ever we've seen that in the setup. And so, like, we were all like, oh, why would they pick a Logi frigate? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, what are they playing? And I think it was the normal Vidra guys. So they actually piloted pretty well and ended up just, like, steamrolling the other team. And I think they won both their matches last weekend. But it was some pretty elite tactics of, like...
Yep.
Nobody really expected that to do anything, but it actually worked really well.
Both their matches wins and... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so we were on the receiving end of the Logi frigate. Nasty Boys were, and that completely shocked us. Like, we hadn't practiced that at all. We hadn't seen that in practice from anyone, like, nothing. And totally took us off guard. And it's, like, completely revolutionized, like, the way we thought about the meta, because they completely caught us flat-footed with the frigate thing, and they banned us perfectly into a setup that would Logi frigate and everything they wanted to do perfectly, and it was like super well executed. So I have a lot of respect for the Vidra guys as a result of that match, because we did not see that coming at all. It was just super well played.
So what was the Logi frigate, like a ship that was discounted? Like what was it about that ship that made you guys not think it was viable originally in the meta?
I think it was just because it just doesn't, it doesn't really rep a lot, right? So it was just hard for us to see a scenario where you'd actually want to bring the Logi frigate as opposed to, some kind of frigate like a Merlin or a Slasher where you could actually tackle, right? Like the standard play is to bring, a lot of people either want to bring cruiser Logi of some variety, right? Because you get a lot more repping power from it. Or if they're going to go for like a max DPS setup, they'll bring they'll bring the Caracal in the cruiser slot, and then a lot of people want to use their frigate and destroyer slots to bring, usually screening power of some variety, right? to stack up on webs and scrams to be able to control the battlefield that way. So that's just sort of like, for us, we thought that was like super optimal way to play, is just basically stick within that general structure. It just didn't really seem like there'd ever be an opportunity where you'd want to sacrifice the screening power of like of your frigate, like a Merlin or a Punisher or a Rifter or whatever, in favor of bringing like a super low, rep per second ship in the, because I mean, it's just a Tech 1. It's not even like Tech 2, right? It's not like a Scalpel or a Kieran or anything like that, right? Which, I mean, those can be somewhat powerful. I mean, we saw people using those in the AT and stuff. So I mean, you can make the Tech 2 ones work. They're definitely stronger and better tank and stuff. But like Tech 1 has a pretty weak tank. Doesn't even rep that much. So it's like, what kind of scenario would you see yourself actually using that? We just had like thought about it, and then Vidra brought out this setup that like countered us perfectly, and the way they flew perfectly, it was like, they were able to hold back all of their like range stuff, use the Ferox, which the real Ferox is like really OP now, I think, and then push really hard with the rope, force us to run away from the rope the whole time while they keep everything farther back out of optimal range, and so their small little frigate can actually rep any incoming damage that they're being dealt, because they're not really getting that much because they're pushing us really hard with their battleship, right? So I mean, it's just really well executed strategically.
And so it became a choice you couldn't catch more than, like, you couldn't catch it to pin it down to deal anything with it, and it just provide a continuous level of reps, which meant that it made it difficult for you to break. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you can't break anything, especially when you're already fighting in fall off.
And that was Suddenly Otters that fielded that? Yeah. So that's the team headed up, and that's the team headed up by Nika Noisia.
Yep, he was the pilot, actually.
Of course. Well, there you go. And they're descended from the very well named Vidra Reloaded team from last AT, if that's right.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
And the other thing about the Logifrigs is, why a lot of people kind of discount them, is you put your cards on the table really early in the pick ban phase. So as soon as you pick that Logifrigate, you're kind of giving the game that you either want to go down a very shield route or a very armor route, and you're taking Logi. Whereas if you want to take a cruiser Logi, you can kind of maybe go down an armor frigate, armor destroyer, and then either not take armor Logi and go with, say, a Caracal and just go for an all DPS setup. As soon as you take one of the two Logi frigates, you kind of like pigeonhole yourself, and you leave yourself open to be countered as well, I think is the problem, which is why a lot of people kind of discount them, because it is in my opinion, it's a risky pick. It can work well, as we saw, but it's a bit of a risky pick.
From my personal experience, if you leave the option on the table to go a no Logi setup against their Logi frig, you pick a Caracal as your cruiser, and
Did you cut out there?
I think you get it.
You're so overwhelmed by the thought of a Caracal against a Logi frigate, it's just can't deal with it.
Well, against most of these Logi frigates with just buffer on them, if it can get in range to deal the damage, it will make short work of them. That is what Caracals are for.
I think actually Sudden Otters had the Caracal as well, but I'm not sure.
They did, which is a little surprising because the way pick bans went, it would have been an option to take against them. They picked the Caracal as the second cruiser pick.
Yeah,
that
it's
was
interesting. On reflection, Elden, do you think instead of going after you put the Richter, after they pick the burst, did you consider just going, oh, hang on, they can't pick a Logi cruiser, so if we pick the Caracal, we're going to have like the one up in the kind of DPS rush, basically.
So in retrospect, I think that is like a decent thought. At the time, I was so shocked to see a Logi frigate. Like, we were like, what? Like, it didn't make any sense to us. And so we just figured, well, okay, did they misclick or like time out, or like it was like super unexpected. And so we just planned to go, we even based on the bans and stuff, we we had an armor setup that we really wanted to run in mind. So we were just like, well, we have no idea what they're doing with this Logi pick. Let's just go with the armor setup that we had already sort of planned to do, and just kind of see what happens. Because I mean, you've only got 45 seconds to make your decision, right? Once you see the ban. And so in retrospect, I mean, it might have not been a terrible idea. Just be like, okay, screw it, we're gonna go shield. They obviously want the Caracal. You know, we could take the Caracal from them and like kind of really mess up their sort of thing. I think, yeah, definitely retrospect is a good plan. But at the time, it's just happening so quickly, and it completely caught us off guard. So the surprise factor was like super high.
It's a lot of like the metagame people talk about in the stress, where, you know, we always hear like some of the game is won through pick ban phase, and then some of the game's won through piloting actually in the arena.
Yeah. And this is where I think this is where the NT differs a lot from the Alliance tournament, for example, because a lot of the Alliance tournament stuff, what you will do is you will build your ships from the ground up, from scratch, fittings and all, based around the rules that you can get, and you have pretty much almost entirely free reign on what you'll do with your comps and your setups. But when it comes to and all you got to do is take into account, well, actually, I'm going to ban this ship out because I know these guys run this comp and these guys run that comp. But the NT picks, you're kind of building your setup on the fly. You know, you kind of have to go, okay, here's my first pick and here's the first bans, and you go through that sequence, and you have to kind of counter what your opponent, or try and anticipate what the opposing team's going to do as you're making the picks. And that's a lot of stress, right? I mean, that's all that planning could just hinge on one ship, and the wrong pick can basically ruin the entire comp.
Oh, certainly. You can't underestimate the power of the draft, and the fact that though you can go into this phase with a plan, unlike the Alliance tournament, you can't just drop your entire comp in. You could have your opposing captain potentially quite aggressively trying to dismantle your comp as you are trying to build it, which we saw later in the day with actually the other Sudden Otters match. Potentially was forcing specifically a comp from the other side by knowing that they had the first cruiser pick and taking away one of the armor logistics already. They forced an armor comp, not an armor comp, a shield comp from their opponents.
Yeah, the whole pick ban thing and winning, losing on it is, like you said, really, really important. And in that match particularly, I think, yeah, we saw what happened there was one team, the footwork team in that case, were banning reactively. I think the teams we see with the most success have a strategy going in. They know what they're going to do. They have a sort of setup in mind that they're going to aim towards, and they're able to adapt and move towards it. And they do it regardless of what the other team is. Some teams, we saw it during the cup a lot with some of the less experienced teams and some of the new guys, kind of coming in and trying to build a comp reactively based on what the other side was picking and banning. So they're saying, you know, team A picks this, okay, we're going to pick that to counter it, and then you end up in such a situation where you have one team with a kind of bit of a mishmash, because the direction of your comp can quite easily change by the time you get to the cruiser. So the team that's trying to counter that ends up countering half your team and then being weak to the other half, and then you're just kind of strong throughout, and you just end up with these sort of, like the footwork team, they brought Rifter, Algos, Merlin, Talwar, Caracal, and then Oracle Apoc, which is, you can see where they're going, but it's not great. Like, it doesn't really have any strong tackle apart from that Merlin, and it just kind of get dismantled by the Subnautis team.
Just one more thought on that point. Really good at the match where that kind of the team had to react to what the other guys like. You can, as well as going into having a picking strategy, like what you want to work towards instead of picking a setup, you also have to go into it to win, to have a banning strategy. So you want to you can use the bans two ways. You can either block them block the enemy from bringing the counters to what you want to bring, or you can force the enemy into picking something they're uncomfortable with and throwing them off the game, which can really, really work. So that was offline versus Exodunks last week, where like the traditional thing is that blue side generally takes up armor first because armor is considered to be a safer bet. It's not necessarily the best, but it's the safer kind of bet because you get more control, you get more drones, you get more newts, and you get a really good projection with the Amar battleships. So they generally tend to pick up armor first. Throughout the first season, that's kind of generally what happened. But what Offline cleverly did is they banned both armor logis, so they prevented themselves from taking armor, but they also prevented Exodunks. And they took the Slasher, Thrasher, and Osprey support, which totally threw Exodunks off their game. They clearly didn't have a solid response to that. They ended up picking a bit of a mishmash of ships because they were reacting to what Offline did in their bans as well as their picks. Which kind of like when they actually got on grid, they tried to primary a Slasher, which was Afterburner. They clearly like were a little bit thrown off and confused, and their setup didn't really gel, and Offline just tore them apart. So that was like a case where Offline were using the bans as an offensive weapon, as not just a defensive one. So yeah, you have to have a pick and a ban strategy.
I want to follow up on this point too, because like in our match in particular, I was thinking our second match, so Nasty Boys against Power Ducks. So I'd be interested to hear Power Ducks guys talk about this. The Power Ducks dudes were setting up for a strong like shield setup. I think they had drafted, it was like Merlin, Thrasher, Osprey, then Ferox, and it came to the battleship, and we had an armor setup going, and I was getting ready to pick Hyperion, but we were blue team, so we were picking second. So they picked their battleship first, and the Power Ducks took Hyperion, which was like really surprising to me because you guys had like a full shield setup. And so I think it's a good example here of like how you can like huge surprise kind of twist. I was just wondering, like for the Power Duck side, like what was the thought there? Were you guys intentionally just trying to take something away from us, even though the Hyperion didn't match up like logistically well with the rest of your setup? Because it definitely like threw a kink in our plans, so I think that worked if that was your intention. But I'd just be kind of curious to hear what your thought process was in taking the Hyperion.
I mean, it's kind of like a bit of both. Like something we found was like in our practicing stuff, we found that red team, like if there's a lot of battleship bans, the red team can really screw over the blue team. But it's like yeah, so like I like doing a Hyperion as a blocking pick because there's so much tank. And it's like a ton of deeps and a ton of tackles, so it's like really, really useful for any team. Like, it works fine in shield logi teams, just a little strong, I think.
It's always a little scary when you see a ship with the wrong tank turn up to a fight and then you try and make it hard anyway. I know I've had a little bit of fun with that at practices because I quite often do the logic for Power Ducks and it gets a bit sketchy sometimes. But in the 5v5 format, I think this is great. One of the great things about this tournament is that there's so few people on grid that you can really mix it up a little bit and come out with something that's completely different and completely surprising. And we do see these things like we see a Hyperion in the Shield Doctrine, and we see Logifrey come out of nowhere and do very well. There's quite a lot of different things that can be done with these 5 people that are actually quite viable in the case that there's not a whole lot of ships on grid to kill. It's just essentially the plan is how do you go about killing them? Well, this is what you choose from. And because everybody's picking from the same sheet, we all know what each other is doing down to a T. So as soon as it's happening on the stream, we see it, we know what they're going with. It's just it's predicting where people are going to go next is very difficult. I'm really looking forward to watching tomorrow to see what these major league teams come out with because it's going to be insane.
We had a question in chat by Battle Dog, and he's wondering what your guys' thoughts are on red versus blue in terms of strongest position for picks and bans. You guys kind of touched on that already, I think, with battleships and then as well as the cruiser logi. Is there anything more to that? Do you guys think one side's better than the other?
Well, I've actually got something to say about this because I've been in the captain's channel because I was in the league when this banning system came out because the very first Event Collides they did was very similar to the Worlds Collide tournament, and then when they went into this second season, I guess the first season as it was now, and this pick banning thing that Bei and friends came up with. I remember when it was announced, and we went away and we put our heads together and we strategized and we did some practices like bannings and so on, and we came to the conclusion that red was much stronger because of X, Y, and Z. And then started chatting to some of the other teams about it, and they'd come to very similar conclusions except for blue. And it kind of went back and forth with teams complaining that one side or the other was overpowered to Bei because of the way the balance was, because of the way that they were approaching it. People were approaching it from one kind of aspect, were coming out with one side being stronger than the other. And then I think, and Bei can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe that red and blue both won equal amounts in the first season.
Yeah,
completely
both
50-50.
of them won 15 games, which is yeah, I sided. I was quite thankful that happened, but because I was definitely worried about there being an imbalance, and some people still feel there is. But obviously, with you going through 30 matches and it being dead on 50-50 in terms of victory conditions, I think it's okay. I think the thing with it is that you have to have a very different strategy depending on what you draw. I mean, ideally we'd have everyone play each other red and blue, but that would double the amount of matches, and unfortunately we don't have the resources to run a season that long yet. So they are picked 50-50, which we flip a coin, get team captains to pick heads and tails. We flip a coin, see whether they're going to be red or blue, and any other team is the other color. So you could end up getting picked red 7 matches in a row, so you can't just kind of have a blue strategy and hope that you get blue, and then if you get red you can go, oh well, we'll win the next one. You have to have a strategy for both, and they are quite different because of that. Logi Cruiser first pick is probably the key point around which a lot of teams build their setups. You have to have a very different strategy, and the good teams have got good strategies for both, and that shows because they can win with both.
I think the red-blue balance might be swayed a little bit this season with the introduction of the links. So as Bei mentioned, the armor side, which is traditionally what blue picks, tends to be the safer choice, just simply because you got better control, a bit more raw EHP, and you just generally, it's easier to fly. It's more forgiving. You can make more mistakes and still win. Whereas if you're red, some of the shield setups that we're seeing people fly can be high skill, especially if they go for what we saw a lot of people use last season was the no logi setup with the caracal in the cruiser slot, and those kiting setups with like the kiting battleships, kiting battle cruisers, and everybody just kiting around can be very, very tricky to fly, and all it takes is one person to make a mistake and that's the match over. Whereas blue a little bit easier, and like I say, with the links coming in this season, in the first week, it's still too early to tell. I mean, the stats could even out, but I think in the first week, blue is more victories this season. Is that right, Bei?
Yeah, I mean, there's only one episode so far. Blue won 5 matches last week, and red won 2. So yeah, I mean, hopefully it averages out a bit better than that throughout the season. I'm hoping, I'll be happy with 60-40. That would be great if it's fine.
And out of the 2 matches, there were 2, like, out of all the matches last weekend, there were 2 really dominating ones. Sudden versus Footwork, that was 15 points to nothing. And Power Ducks versus Nasty Boys, with Nasty Boys winning 15 points to nothing. Any of you guys got any thoughts on those particular matches?
Well, I think you have to discount the Paradox Nasty Boys one because of that micro jump drive incident earlier on. So I don't think that's really a true comparison there. And then the Sudden Otters versus Footwork, we briefly touched on that. I think it was just the case of Footwork got outpicked and outbanned in the pick ban stage, and then couldn't pull it together in the flying stage. To be honest.
Another thing we should bring up about the red side, blue side is if you look through a lot of the previous games, I believe red side, if I'm looking at it correctly, one side never actually got to pick armor, whereas one side got entirely to pick armor. It seems people have kind of picked up on the fact that the picking and ban goes a certain way, and red side has never been armor last week. was entirely either shield or no logi setups, whereas red was a mix of armor, shield, and a no logi setup.
But is armor better?
Are you sure about that? Because I think the footwork versus Make 'em Are Great Again team, the red side, they're in armor. They've got punch and
They
tower.
took armor, but it was a no logi setup.
Yes.
Oh, I
They-
see. You're talking about specifically bringing armor logi.
Yeah.
Okay.
And interestingly, they could have picked Ogora if they wanted, but they chose not to and went for a Mauler instead. So there's definitely some. I think this season is definitely less straightforward in terms of armor, shield, no logi. Like last season, you could put all three, or like any setup into those comfortable kind of brackets. Whereas I think in the minor league, you're starting to see it a little bit that break apart, and possibly in the major league this week, hope maybe we'll see that. You know, teams realizing that going just like the tank doesn't have to match to have a winning combination. So hopefully it will be interesting to see if that pans out or not, or whether people stick to the blue red shield armor thing.
Picking
Sorry.
up on that before, you mentioned how it was awkward to go a different tank type than what your logi was. I wanted to pick up that it's if you're ever going to do that, it's a very excellent ship of the Hyperion to do that on, because the Hyperion hosts a ridiculous amount of self-tank compared to quite a lot of the other battleships. So if you're going to ever do it on a ship, I'd say the battleship is the Hyperion is the best ship to do it on.
It's actually the one we've seen that done most with. I think we've seen at least 3 or 4 picks between the last week in the Cup where the Hyperion was picked into a shield comp. We also saw one last week where the Apocalypse was picked into a shield comp, which was a slightly more interesting, if less productive, pick.
And the APOC is really strong.
Yeah, I think the
I think it's
Apex is
probably-
one of the better ones.
I mean, a
Like
shield team, maybe not the best idea. It is like as a whole, one of the strongest battleships, definitely.
Yeah, I think if you're going to bring in APOC and the shield logi, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot there. You may as well just not bother bringing the shield logi at all, because you could swap that out with like a Caracal or some other cruiser and get like maximum use. I mean, what use is a shield logi going to be with an APOC really?
Well, how much like HP does it actually have? Does the APOC have for shields? Because it only really matters for some of these smaller ships. Like I'm thinking destroyer and like frigate, where like the cruiser's the one thing keeping them alive and in the fight. Or some of these battleships have so much buffer. Like it doesn't matter if it's shield or armor or even hull. Like as long as it's getting reps of some sort, it can kind of hold off. As long as the logi is pilot's good and can like stagger them and whatnot.
Yeah, but it's just in a case where you either want to burn people down as fast as you can, or you want to outlast them. This doesn't really do either, because if you want to burn them down as fast as you can bring more DPS. Don't bring a logi. Or if you want to outlast them, then match your logi with your battleships and the rest of your ships and have a bit more of a solid comp.
Yeah.
Yes, the problem with taking the off tank type, of course, is that you're simply not getting the rewards from those reps. The HP may be the same, but the EHP that you're getting off of each of those reps is going to be so much less into an untanked buffer layer.
That makes sense.
It's just a risky sort of middle of the road choice. It's kind of indecisive in my opinion. Like I think Bei mentioned, like you see people coming in with like a distinct strategy and executing it, and that's what works well. And then getting lured into picking these strange choices. Like it might be sort of a gimmick that works in a specific setup, and gimmicks have a place in tournaments because sometimes the right gimmick at the right time can win the match. But relying on the gimmick from the get-go is just generally not a good idea.
One thing I actually wanted to touch on briefly was the tendency with the armor shield divide for more of the no logi comps to be picking shields and more of the logistics comps to be picking armor. We saw, I think it was actually something like 5 comps picked no logi, 5 comps picked armor, and 4 picked shield. But of those no logi comps, I believe Feel free to correct me if I'm very wrong on this, but I believe the majority of them picked predominantly shield ships. And I think one of the reasons we're seeing this is armor. Armor has really good options in both the destroyer and battlecruiser slots for keeping their own logi alive. You have the Algos and can anyone tell me what the neuting destroyer is called?
Dragoon.
Thank you. You have the Algos and Dragoon, which are drone boats in the destroyer slot, and then you have the Myrmidon and Prophecy in the battlecruiser slot, and both of those allow you a huge pool of rep bots, which are how you can keep your logi alive in this format.
Yeah, I think that's probably quite a good observation. I think the other thing is the shield is pretty much better at kiting in this setup with the fits. You've got battleships that are better at it, the cruisers, you've got the caracal. Although it doesn't really make that much of a difference if you're going no logi, you can mix armor and shield all you want, but the shield ships tend to be better at kiting, and if you're going no logi, you want to kind of mitigate damage by just not being shot. Kiting around is good, so you're going to pick the best kiting ships.
So, if we can kind of segue, I know we have had a lot more ECM ships, and I think a lot more E-War ships in general in this tournament than we've seen in the past. How are you guys feeling about that? Or was that something expected? Have you guys factored in E-War, or do you think it's, or like E-War, ECM?
Have we?
The Scorpion's used quite often. I haven't seen the Griffin yet.
The Scorpion itself has been picked a fair amount. Being able to go into the last slot, it provides a lot of options, and I'm personally not sure how it was fit first season, but the multi-spectrals mean that you can pick it into pretty much anything. The Griffin, unfortunately, is quite pigeonholed with one Minmatar, one Amar, and one multi-spectral jam.
I think
the Scorpion, with the new fit, how it is, it's definitely a lot stronger than it used to be. It's actually disgusting.
I was going to say, it's also been moved to armor tank, which means it has a tank coming into this season.
Yeah,
I think
I was a bit
last
worried it was
season
going
was
to be a
shield
bit
tank.
overpowered. Yeah, it was shield, and it had I think cruise missiles on it as well. So it wasn't as effective because it had those mid slots being used for tank as well. So it didn't have as much jamming power, and its tank wasn't as strong. So yeah, I think I kind of decided. Well, I kind of wanted it to be a bit more viable as a pick because I don't think it was at all last season. And yeah, I might have made it a little bit too strong. I don't know what. How did you get many jams off in your match where you brought it, Elden?
Yeah, I think it was working pretty well for us. I mean, we kind of have mixed feelings about bringing ECM into Scorpion just because you're always at the mercy of like RNG, right? Sometimes, like we've seen in practice, like we've had dudes get jammed out like 10 times in a row and it feels like super overpowered. And we're like, oh, we have to like ban it or something because we don't want to run into it. And other times, it just seems like the jams aren't going at all. So I don't know. Simply because you can get these crazy swings in probability and whether or not the jam goes. It can feel super strong at times, can feel super weak at times. So maybe that means it's actually pretty well balanced, and you just have to pray to the RNG gods that you get the jams that you need at the right time. It's risky though. I mean, it's not a ship that I feel super comfortable with like all the time simply because it's of its unpredictability.
It's especially strong if the other side picks an augur.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievably strong against the Aug.
Yeah, the augur's the only non-seaboard logi, I believe. It's the lowest sensor strength already, so the augur is like super easy to jam. Although, and I mean, my team, we favour the augur. We prefer the augur over the executor, but I know that in terms of picks, the executor is definitely the favourite. But in terms of wins, the augur comes out on top. And Bei, I know you like to talk about this particular part.
Yeah, it was a bit of a running joke last season because I was like, guys, why are you still picking Execra? Like, in terms of the statistics, it only has a 33% win rate. Like, it's like, and it was one of the most picked ships as well. So it's not like it was a stat that was kind of, oh well, you know, there's low numbers of stats you're looking at, so it's not a very fair kind of representation. Like, it was one of the ships that was picked most, but it also failed the most as well. So it was kind of like a mystery to me why captains were so hell-bent on taking it still, even though they knew that it was likely, well, based on previous results, it was likely to only win 1 in 3 times. You would have thought you'd want to bring a ship that was a little bit more reliable. But I think it's because of that ECM vulnerability with the Augur. Means that if you're going to armor, it's just have to go Executor most time, unless you've got a plan to counter the ECM that people could bring in the Scorpion.
Do you think that'll have a big effect this season? The fact that people can bring a viable battleship ECM boat against something like Nogger? Do you think you'll see even more Executor picks, or do you think it'll stay about the same?
Scorpion's one of those weird ships that you either have to have. You can definitely counter it. There's definitely ways of playing against it. The multispectrals don't have a particularly deep range, so if you know that and you're aware of it, you can kind of like outmaneuver. It's pretty tricky because it's kind of it can move around a fair bit with that. I think it's with micro jump drive, so it's hard. It's hard like to counter with moving around, but it's possible. I think that it's just one of those ships you just have to be aware of that the enemy could pick it, and you have to know what to do. Like if you're thrown off when the enemy pick it, then you're kind of doomed. So you just have to have a good plan to counter it, and I think there is ways. I don't think it's brokenly overpowered. It'd be interesting to see if it just ends up being a ban magnet, and if people kind of just go, oh, do you know what? I just don't want to have to deal with what happens if they pick a Scorpion. I just don't want to have to worry about that. So let's just ban it. I wouldn't be surprised if it became kind of a popular ban in the third pick, the third ban slot. We'll see though.
Kind of like the Hyperion last season.
Yeah, exactly.
Another a really big thing to mention is like from practice, you almost if a Scorpion drops 5 jams on a battleship and it's non-seabowed, we've been getting we've been having really a lot of trouble in practice because the Scorpion with 5 jams on one battleship almost jams them out 100% of the time. And like with staggered jams, it's ridiculously stupid against an unseabowed battleship, and I think a lot of people are gonna try and pick up on that and see it's really overpowered in certain situations, and they're just gonna try and bandwagon it.
It's also still a risky pick because it doesn't all. I mean, hey, you get these jams pretty consistently, but all it takes is that one time where it all just falls apart, and that goes back to the whole relying on a gimmick. Because sometimes you're trying to. What we saw in the AT, we saw a noob ship jam something, didn't we? That was
the Ibis.
Yeah,
the Hero Ibis, yeah.
I mean, what are the chances in that? I mean, that's just RNG right there. And on the flip side, you could have like a totally linked up Falcon fail to jam something really simple, like 4 times in a row. It just occasionally happens, and everyone laughs at you.
I say better than most. The Ibis is in fact a bonus DCM boat.
That is true.
But I think we saw that
The
last
interesting
week.
thing I see.
Go on.
Sorry. So the interesting thing I see about the Scorpion is it's such a drastic pick that you can take at the end of the pick ban phase, and which makes it kind of awkward because of the pick order. All of the answers that you could potentially pick to ECM, ironically, a lot of them we saw picked in the offline comp against Exodus last week. You can pick Cormorant with a Recebo on it, you can pick a Receboed Logi, and you can pick information links. All of these have to have been done before Scorpion can even be on the table, which I think will potentially weight people towards just banning it out so that you don't have to deal with that. You don't ever end up in that instance where you're wishing you'd picked the answers before because you can never pick them reactively.
Yeah, I think that's where it probably end up in that third ban slot, because you can kind of go, oh well, I haven't brought a receiver ship, or I haven't brought a Logi with a sense booster, so I have to make sure there's going to be no Scorpion. We'll see. That'll be interesting.
We don't have any remote Seabos at all, do we, on any of our ships?
We do. We have
yes.
a pair of destroyers that bring them, one of them being the Cormorant and the other one being the Catalyst.
Okay. But that's still
Both-
after the fact if they pick it because it's in the battleship slot. So you have to plan ahead
Indeed.
for that.
Yeah, one of the suggestions and something I've been thinking of, if we're going to potentially do a season 3, hopefully one day, we move the destroyer and the frigate picks till after the battleship, so it starts off with cruiser, and then goes battle cruiser, and then I don't know which way around, but basically so that you can counter the core ships with your smaller ships. So if people have an ECM vulnerability there, then you can pick a Griffin, or if they've gone for projection setups, you can bring a Maulus to counter that. So it makes it easier to bring those kind of ships that have like remote boosters to make it more viable, really, I guess, because like if you bring a Catalyst now and they don't bring ECM, then it's kind of like, well, you would have been better off with an Algos.
Well, it was one of the things that was quite painful to watch actually about that offline versus X-Dunks match was the offline comp all of these comps are strong. A lot of these teams, though there are the occasional major errors, all of these teams are picking strong comps. But they're not necessarily picking comps where the strengths are useful to them. And that's what we saw with that offline team. If it had gone up against ECM, it would have been so resilient with the combination of effects it had. But it ended up with so many modules and so many of the unique elements of their ships invested into things that just didn't help them. The Recibo on that corner, I think, ended up giving a bit more scan res to the Hurricane, trying to get a faster volley off against that slasher, and first few seconds of the match went by, and suddenly that module means nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, the slasher.
Sorry,
There you go.
Going to those little AB frigates, I think we're going to see a lot more of them this season. We didn't see very much use of them last season. There's probably a couple of reasons behind there. I think mainly there only was one. There was the slasher, so it's kind of limited to shield. I think now you've got the Atron, is it? It's also the sort of same for the armor.
You've got 4 tackle frigates carrying ABs. Ironically, the Slasher, despite being faster of them, is one of them that only carries a scram, whereas the Atron and Executioner carry the scram web.
Yeah, I think they're just super hard to hit, and they're such good screening ships. Like if you have a Slasher get up on top of a Hyperion, for example, I'm sure Battledog in the comments will be able to tell you all about getting scrammed by a Slasher with an Hyperion. You just can't do anything to it. You need other support, so you need some drones, or you just need other people to kill that little Slasher and set you free again. So I think we might see a whole bunch more of them this season. I'm not sure what's changed specifically in the meta apart from more of them, but I think we'll see more of them.
Are you guys excited for tomorrow's show? Since Analysts
Oh, yeah.
want to talk more about slashers? Because there was a team who loved the slasher, and they agreed. But
Yeah, slashers are good. I mean, we just practiced. So the team Johnny, we just had a practice against the Exodus team on Thunderdome, and Battledog spent about 3 matches just completely locked down by a single slasher, and he had to go bang his head off the wall. So he was getting incredibly annoyed. So they're tricky ships. If you don't have some setup to kind of counter them, or you don't take that into consideration, it can be something that just kind of ruins your day.
The way to win tomorrow is for the major league teams to ban Slasher.
Yeah, Slasher first ban, second ban, I don't know, Scorpion or something.
Yeah.
Go completely off the wall.
I'm super hyped about tomorrow. It's the first show of Major League for season 2, and we've got some really good matchups coming up. We've got the final match. The first thing to note, if you're a regular viewer, is that we're pushing back. We're starting at 9 p.m. instead of 7 p.m. And that's good. We're going to follow the 07 show, where we also have. Hopefully, CCP Guard will be announcing. I know he will be announcing the ship hull that the teams will be winning. The skin of the ship hull that the teams will be winning this year. or this season rather. So that's pretty exciting. So then we'll be kicking off at 9 o'clock. And the final match will be other team versus Team Johnny, which will be quite interesting. And I've also got the other team versus Volta at 10 p.m, which is probably one I'm looking forward to most, which was basically the top two teams from last season. They're both like really quite good at this kind of format. I know Hoodie takes it probably a little bit more seriously than most in terms of his theory crafting and practicing. So he really understands the meta really well. And so does Team Volta, and they've got some really great pilots. So that might be a kind of like an early indication as to how the season's gonna pan out. Which one of those teams win that match?
We all know the most important match is the very first one, the Clever Girls v Phalanx team.
Mainly because we get to see if you can start a season properly this year.
Hopefully. Instead, well, no, it's tradition. We lose the first match and then win everything else. And win. We're looking to add a third star to our amazing logo.
It is a very nice logo. I do. It's one of my favourites.
I think if there is an NT, we are getting a t-shirts for the next NT, if there is one.
That'd be awesome.
Are you gonna have that one pilot again, Tyrion Hecky?
To my dismay, yes, we're gonna have Tyrion.
Oh,
Shout out if he's listening. If he's not, I'm gonna make him listen just for the one shout out.
Team Johnny, tomorrow we're going to continue our meteoric rise from joining the minor league to coming up into the major league. We came third in the major league last year. We plan to continue that upward trend, knocking off Volta and the other team. That's the plan, and we're going to stick to it.
As I say, I linked the schedule both in TeamSpeak as well as Twitch chat. But you can see these logos and then the times for all these teams playing, and the times are in Eve time, but not the military time. So that's kind of weird. So they start at like 2100 or 9 o'clock. But as I say, for people not participating, are you guys looking forward to any particular match? I know, Bei, you kind of touched on that.
I mean, we've practiced with a few of the major league teams, so I'm really interested to see how they go. I'm curious to see if they've been using weird comps against us, or they actually plan on using that.
That's interesting that a lot of minor teams, there's cross scrimmage between minor league and major league teams, which is kind of cool. Obviously, they respect each other, and I don't think like Ithica earlier was kind of like, oh, the minor league's a bit more derpy than our league. He's a bit elitist, obviously. But I don't think it's quite true anymore, because the cup was really. I was surprised at the quality of the teams coming into the cup. Like we had 28 teams sign up, which kind of blew me away really. And Exodunks offline, Nasty Boys, Otters, like some really good teams, and some also the other guys are also really strong as well, like Paradox, Templars, Make 'em All Great Again. They've all got great pilots. Like, it's a really strong minor league, and I think that I think it's really interesting to see that they're kind of practicing against each other, and I think it's really cool.
Yeah, you certainly made the minor leagues a bit more difficult this year. I think it's much more competitive, just simply because, like you say, the quality of some of those teams coming in. I'm absolutely sure we'll see some of them go straight into the major leagues next year, or next season, I should say. Just because some of those teams are just really, really good pilots and really, experienced tournament teams that will do really well. And we've seen them do really well already, so I'm pretty sure not only will they do well this season, they'll get into the major leagues and they'll continue to do well. So you're just making it harder for us, Bei.
It's good though.
Sorry, go ahead. No, sorry, I was just saying, one thing we do know for sure as well is that with the Major League, and this is one thing that we'll also have to consider, it's not just the division of skins, but 4 teams are going to get relegated from that, and 4 teams are going to come up from this very strong minor league. So it's just going to continue to get us more and more intense as time goes on, really. I'm really looking, maybe in like 2 or 3 seasons time, after several promotions and all that, we could see some really, really strong Major League teams. And they're already there. I mean, the people last season were very competitive as well, so I'm really excited for tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it'd be interested to see if any teams that do come up to major leagues and then get relegated back down to minor leagues kind of, fizzle out, or they get their act together and sort of, pull themselves back up into the major leagues again. Because not only can you be a major league team relegate to the minor leagues, if you then continue to do bad, or just go in a huff and withdraw from the season, you then get kicked out completely, and you'd have to go in through the cup to come back in. I know one team in particular got a little bit huffy, decided not to, after they got kicked out of the major league last year, they went down to the minors, decided they didn't want to play in the minors, so they took their ball and left.
It's an important thing to note that there's only two outcomes in the minor leagues, which is get promoted or get relegated. There's no, oh, you did good enough to stay. You get promoted or you get relegated, and that's it. Whereas in the major, the top 4 stay in the major league. They've just won.
Yeah, it's kind of brutal. The reasoning behind that, and a lot of people are like, oh, that's really harsh. You fight all the way through the cup. You get like one of a handful of people to make it into the minor league, and then at the end of that you can get kicked back down again, and then have to, because the single elimination cup format is really brutal. It's almost lucky dip to an extent. I mean, you have to be good, obviously, but there's also some good teams being knocked out there in the first rounds when they get unlucky picks. But yeah, the theory is that we would love a system as EVNT. We would love a system where we could have 50 teams in some sort of league system. But it's just like we have to. So much of running EVE tournaments is very manual process. There's a lot of people that go along in the background. I think there's something like 24 staff on our roster to run this season. And it's still hard work with that many people involved. So we have to keep the numbers relatively small. But so, obviously, to give more EVE players a chance as possible as taking part, kicking 4 teams out the bottom opens up 4 spots for new teams, which is, just keep it as fresh as possible. So the major league is where you kind of you cling on, you stay in if you're really the best of the best, and the minor league is where you kind of it's your kind of either your route in to prove yourself, or it's your kind of last chance to to turn things around and then make your way back up to the major league.
So now we are coming up to the end of the hour. And if anybody has to leave, feel free to do so. But if you guys want, we can continue to stay and chit-chat. I don't think chat... I've been watching the Twitch chat, and I don't think they've had any questions.
Well, there was one about a potential CSM candidacy.
Yeah, I'm not running for CSM. Please. But yeah, like I was gonna say, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you guys wanted to discuss?
How about we discuss how few micro-warp drive tackle picks the shield teams have?
Yes. So you think there should be? What would you suggest then? I guess that's interesting. I'm always really open to ideas of this format. It's a format that I kind of like. Basically, a little bit of background. And if you just tuned into this for the first time, the EVNT Championship was developed out of basically the success of the live tournaments we did in Nottingham for EVNT Nottingham. We did a 2v2 format there where it was fixed fittings, and it worked really, really well in the live scene. So it was kind of trying to bring that success onto I was going to say Tranquility, but it's not, it's Thunderdome. But to balance the 60 odd chips that are available is really, really tricky. And we do occasionally spot gaps in the sort of things that people want in certain slots. So if anyone does have any ideas, feel free to PM me. And yeah, how would you improving shield frigates is definitely something that people have requested we do.
I don't know. Just you can sort it out. I don't know, but it's Armor Team have Incursus, Rifter, and Punishers all good tackle frigs, but it's Shield only has the Merlin micro drive. I think it's a little limiting.
I think mainly the issue is that you have so many more armor frigates at the moment. Most of if you look through the list of shield frigates that we have, very few of them that aren't tackle already. Could you easily move across to be tackle? Well, you've got the two ABs, of course, from our cycle of 4 AB frigates. You've got two remote computer. Actually, that might be the issue. You've got the two remote tracking computer, this is, frigates from a cycle of 4, but those two carry no tackle, whereas the armor ones both carry a web.
Yeah, I think the difficult thing with frigates is that in this format you want to stack quite a lot of tank on them, because otherwise they just kind of disappear under the damage from a battleship and a battlecruiser. If they get pinned down, so you need to have a little, as much buffer as you can pack onto them to give you a logi or just time to maneuver away, to give them any kind of survivability. And to do that, then if you put a micro warp drive on that, also makes them more vulnerable because they're signature size. So you can only put one. You can either put a web or a scram. If you put both, they have no tank. So that's the disadvantage of a shield tackling frigate. Yeah, it's just one of those slight issues with the format, I guess. We'll figure out around it.
And then there was actually a question asked in chat, and Battle Dog was asking predictions for between matches tomorrow. I was gonna say, do you guys have any sort of favorites that you want to win or you think will win?
I think the other team versus Volta will be a good match. I know Volta will be out to win that one, as will Hoodie and his team, to try and hold on to their title, as it were. If we pretend there's like a championship belt or something that the other team have, we'll see who takes the belt home tomorrow night. That will be that match to watch. There'll be a couple other really good matches in there. The first match should be a good one. The Clever Girls Phalanx match, I think, will be quite a good one as well, to be honest. But those are my two picks matches to watch. Then Ithica's matches to watch: other team versus Volta and versus Phalanx.
I'm just really excited to see how the meta is going to evolve from week 1 to week 2 in the majors. Just see how teams are banning and picking. See if there's a lot of continuity, or if Major League is just on a whole other level altogether. Just kind of excited to see how it's going to go.
Sorry, go ahead, Beck.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot more experience in the format in the Major League. Although having said that, the Cup, these guys have fought like 4 or 5 matches to win, so they're not that far behind the Major League guys in terms of experience. But Major League guys have got a little bit of edging experience, so I expect the meta to be slightly different. But and also it was interesting. Like last season, the Major League responded to the previous minor league shows meta slightly. That was kind of like incorporated into their planning, which is quite interesting. So it'd be interesting to see the following week whether or not the minor league learn from this week's Major League. Should be quite interesting.
And I think I was gonna say, Brett, did you have something to say?
Yes, I'm going to use this opportunity to take my leave. Thank you for inviting me on here. It's been a great experience. I had a lot of fun, even though I didn't talk much.
That's okay. Thank you for joining us. I'm gonna go on.
Good luck for everybody here who's playing tomorrow, myself included, and I'm going to look forward to it, and I hope you all watch it. Go Cover Girls. I'll see you later.
Take care. And then, Aleksi, I know you said you had to dip too.
Indeed I do. I have people on Tranquility screaming at me to go save them, so I think I will have to. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here tonight, and I wish all of the competitors luck tomorrow, and all of the commentators and staff as well, because I know you need it.
Alright, thank you. Have a good night. Alright, as I say, do you guys have anything more to add? I think we can end it if people are needing to go. Bei, do you want to sit here and ramble some more?
Oh, I'm happy to ramble as long as you want me to, Rain, but I don't want to impose. So yeah, no, we're good. It was cool. It was really nice chatting with everyone.
Alright, it's good. I know Hoodie wants us to talk about the Drake, but the Drake is awesome. I think
The
that's
Drake, the Drake is awesome.
I was gonna say, I don't
Like,
think
no one's picked it yet, but I'm really confused.
I was a massive
why.
proponent of the Drake last season. I was like always advocating for picking the Drake, because the Drake last season I quite liked. I mean, it had some cap issues, but it was kind of overlooked. People just kind of ignored it. They're like, it's just a Drake. But it was actually pretty decent.
The problem is the Ferox is strong now. The real Ferox is really strong. So I think if you're a shield team, you're going to be pretty hard pressed to pass that up if it's available to you.
Yeah, I think although the Drake does have that shield burst, which is
It's true.
really good,
It's true.
really strong.
I used to be a Drake fanboy, but I prefer the Cyclone now. Just because it's faster and because it's faster, and I think the scrams are more useful.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favourite ships in the format, and it doesn't get picked that often. But yeah, I wish it got picked more, so I'm going to be cheering for you guys if you pick it, definitely.
Alright, and Loca.
Yeah, I think
Go
like
on.
ASB as well is nice. I'm done, you can move on.
I know Loca had something he wanted to say.
Yes. So this weekend, specific to just this weekend, we are giving away a IGC Apocalypse skin, 1 Plex, and 10 luxury yachts to some very lucky people. All you have to do to be able to enter this is follow the guidelines on this link, which I will post in chat now. It is a total giveaway. There is no ISK cost into doing it. Sometimes previously we've had competitions for ISK before where relating to projects. This isn't one of those. This is just straight up. We're giving away a skin this weekend. All you have to do to be able to be involved with it is you have to follow our Twitch, like our Facebook page, and retweet the tweet that's linked in the article. If you do those 3 things, you put yourself in with a chance to win the skin or any of those prizes that are on offer. It's a nice, easy way to do it. There was a little bit of concern before about personal information. You don't need to put personal information on there if you don't want. It's totally okay with us. All we want to be able to do is make sure that we can bring the action live to you and bring all the announcements straight to your doorstep. So do get involved. Get yourself a free skin. It could be a good time, and do stay tuned this weekend as we may give away more things along the way.
Yep, and with that, I will close the show, unless somebody else has anything to add. Tune in to the 07 show on CCP's Twitch at 2000 tomorrow and watch that. It should last about an hour, and then we will be taking over at 2100 here on Eve and T TV on our Twitch to show the first season, or the first round of season 2 of the Major Leagues. Thank you,
And
guys.
there will be explosions.
Guaranteed explosions. Have a good night, everyone.
Just don't let Nash near the keyboard.